Hello and welcome. I'm James Creedon. Glad you could join us for this edition of Tech 24. In this week's show, solar power under the spotlight. We'll bring you to Babcock Ranch, an oddly named town in Florida, which is the very first green town in the US. Climate skeptics are nowhere to be found here. The town is fully solar powered. And in Test 24, we'll get to try out a new water purification system that turns tap water into crystal clear mineral water. Thanks for watching. Now, first off, the US may have pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, but some towns and cities have pledged to abide by the agreement. In Florida, the Sunshine State, one town has gone even further by becoming the first solar-powered municipality in the US. Selena Sykes takes a look at daily life in America's pioneering green town.
A town like no other in the US, leading the way in sustainable living. Every building in Babcock Ranch in Florida uses solar power. Home to 340,000 solar panels, it's the first town in the US to run completely on renewable energy. There's no climate skeptics to be found here. The first residents to move in are all enthusiastic about their new eco-friendly way of life.
There's no other place like it in Florida or in the country I haven't seen.
Sustainability is the only way to go to feed back the environment.
Everything in the town is within walking distance. House prices range from 200,000 to 500,000 euros, double the state average. But all the homes are built using energy-efficient materials. The town is also leading the way in eco-friendly transport, with this zero-emission self-driving shuttle bus, which residents hail like a taxi using an app. At the moment, it's sharing the roads with normal cars, but the town hopes to become a zero-emission zone. The man behind this ambitious project, Sid Kitston, a former American football player.
We created this to be a model for the future here in the United States. And what we said is we want to prove that sustainability, that preservation and doing things the right way makes sense not only for the environment and for the future of our kids and our grandkids and the planet, but it makes economic sense. Because if it makes economic sense, then everyone will want to do it.
It's a big investment in the future of the planet, to which 100 families have signed up so far. To reach its goal of attracting 50,000 residents, the town developers have built a state-run school, which is, of course, eco-friendly. Today, shale gas and its effects on the environment are on the curriculum. Not all pupils live in Babcock Ranch. While in school, they follow an eco-friendly lifestyle, eating lunch cooked up using ingredients from the town's vegetable garden. While the children may have been won over, not all their parents are rushing to become homeowners here.
Have a good weekend. It's fun to watch everybody evolve and doing different things. And I mean, we drive this big truck, but it would be nice to be able to do something different, you know?
With a space 6 times bigger than Manhattan, the town's developers are certainly aiming high. But most of the land will remain untouched. 80% has been sold to the state of Florida, which has been turned into a wildlife reserve.
OK, so we've seen in Florida how solar energy is beginning to take off, at least one pilot town. But here in France, a law was passed last year that is proving to be a catalyst for boosting solar energy. Dan and Jay, we are on the cusp of something pretty big here, I think, in terms of a transfer towards solar energy and a lot of incentives to make that transfer.
That's right. This law is generally called auto-consumption, so which means that people can use energy from renewable resources either collectively or individually. And this is proving to be quite an important measure in boosting the use of solar energy in France. So there are a couple of examples I can quote, starting with Bordeaux, in which 60 tenants of a building, they have started using solar energy from the beginning of this year, using 260 square meters of photovoltaic panels. Nice. And there's another town in central France, it's called Marmagne, which there are 2,000 inhabitants in the town. So almost 65 to 70% of their energy needs will be covered by the 800 square meters of photovoltaic panels. We can see here they're installed on a large tract of land.
And so there's municipal sort of incentives being provided by
Absolutely.
the authorities and all
There
of
are
that.
many incentives. There are tax incentives and other incentives, but the most important aspect of the use of renewable resources is obviously there's no carbon footprint, so
Right.
it's very green. And secondly, the tariffs are also low. So, for example, in this town, they're expecting that in 2018 itself, the tariffs will go 5% lower.
Right.
So that's a bigger
So people, it's
incentive
not
as
just
well.
about being altruistic and looking after the planet. People are
It's
also,
practical.
they're being
very
incentivized by
practical.
saving some money. Now, we're seeing changes in the source of energy, solar, renewable, as we just heard, but also in how it's distributed. So tell us more about that.
Well, the now ubiquitous blockchain technology is at the base of this management of distribution of electricity. A French company called Sunchain, they are using blockchain to essentially measure.
Give a tiny definition of blockchain for people who don't know it.
It's a distributed database, so it's a public ledger, so in which different participants, they can...
It's like a network.
Yeah, they can
online.
certify,
Right.
they can encrypt, and finally, they'll be able to secure this information. So in this case, this information is related to the history of energy transfers. So where is this energy produced? How much is produced? Who uses it? Whether energy is reinjected into the system and again taken out. So the reason
Smart
why...
system. So if you have more being used, a surplus here, it can be transferred here, and the system
Exactly.
understands
So
that.
for example, a building is producing positive energy, so it's producing more energy than required. So maybe there's a charging station and a bicycle charging station next to it, and that needs to be fed with energy. So perhaps through this smart distribution network, the excess energy can be moved to that charging station.
Sounds like the future. Now, what's more, to add to that, a new law is being introduced in France in 2020. So there was the law last year incentivizing all this. There's another law in 2020 whereby all buildings constructed beyond that date must be energy positive. In other words, the building must produce more energy than it consumes, thus potentially feeding the grid. Now, next up, we turn our attention to biohacking. It could be described as do-it-yourself biology, a biotech social movement in which individuals and small organizations study biology using the same methods as research institutions. Now, in Sweden, one group of biohackers is getting down to basics. They've been sequencing their own DNA. Why not? In a bid to learn more about their bodies. Now, a DNA test sheds light on gene variations that may indicate poor health, but some experts have their reservations about casual genome sequencing. Let's take a look.
These techies are conducting a system analysis on their own bodies. At a startup fair in Stockholm, visitors are invited to sequence their DNA. A quick shake, off to the lab, and 2 weeks later the results are in.
When you do a DNA test, you learn a lot of things about yourself, but it's also an introduction to understanding the body as an information system. What kind of information can I take out of the system and make digital? Can I process this information? And ultimately, how can I hack it?
Rather than analyzing the entire genome, that's over 3 billion genes, Nordic Laboratories has narrowed down 30 variants which may be counteracted by changing our lifestyle choices. Genes which determine your ability to absorb certain nutrients, or even your natural tendency to get a good night's sleep.
So by empowering individuals to find out more about themselves, suggests to me that they will begin thinking about what they put in their mouth, think about their exercise, think about their sleep patterns, etc. And that will help mitigate the risk of disease.
These hackers see biotech much like we once saw computers, a niche obsession for the few, but soon to become ubiquitous. However, some in the scientific community fear the pitfalls of amateur genetics.
And it's very difficult for a layman to understand which ones are important and which ones are not. And so if you don't have a specific question, sequencing your entire DNA will only cause problems. It's actually no use for anyone.
Are these biotech geeks playing God with their health, or just avoiding another trip to the doctors?
Now it's time for this week's Test 24 on Tech 24. And as ever, Dhananjay Kadalkar has a nifty product or device for this week's test, and it's a water purification system called La Vie. French product, La Vie means life. Water is life. Tell us more.
Well, this system is used to purify drinkable water that comes out of the tap. It's not for water that has sand particles or other solid particles. So essentially it is for treating water which has chlorine compounds or traces of medicine or traces of pesticide and of course virus and bacteria. So the process is very simple. There's a box that is equipped with ultraviolet A LEDs, and all you have to do is fill this bottle, which is made of borosilicate glass. It's pretty strong, and you
put it inside the box.
Right. Close the box. The ultraviolet light starts
penetrating the glass.
Exactly. It starts treating the water.
Yeah.
And because of the ultraviolet light, there's a photo dissociation. So this light helps in breaking down the chlorine compounds. And once the chlorine compounds get broken, there is a production of radicals. So these radicals are basically ionized radicals. So they help in oxidation.
Right.
And it's this oxidative process that kills viruses and bacteria, and it mineralizes or it breaks down the pesticides and turns them into
just to verify, does the water have to be drinkable already, and it's just about improving drinkable water? So you can't use this on water that is possibly contaminated?
Contaminated, I mean, you can call this invisible contamination, but this cannot be used for water which has sand particles or other solid particles.
So it's just a life-enhancing product for people who want to live even healthier lives, basically.
Absolutely.
All right, well, can't argue with that. So that's La Vie, Water is Life, and that's this week's Test 24. It brings us to the end of this edition of Tech 24. Do stay tuned, and thanks for watching.